Thanks for making the time for this. I can imagine how busy you are with everything going on in the build and development world. And I first wanted to share with you a bit of maybe an anecdote, if I could, about to Easter weekend. I was up at my lake house with my wife and my kids, and on the third floor of my home, we had a speedway into our toilet, which was old, rupture, which caused a massive flood through my house. About 70% of the house is done. It's going to be gutted,
Bummer.
100-year-old house, asbestos in the walls, the whole drill. And as I was preparing for today and looking at your work and watching the videos on the Olive home, on the Nightingale home, I was absolutely blown away. And I was saying, if I was working or I could work with a builder developer who really got my design and aesthetic, this would really be it.
Thank you.
I'm in awe, literally in awe of your work, and I'm not just saying that to kind of blow sunshine up your ass. I mean it very sincerely, and if I can share with you why. It's obvious that these homes are huge in terms of footage, in terms of budget. I mean, these are incredible opportunities, but I don't believe that it takes a great amount of skill to build something that is huge and expensive and ostentatious. That's not necessarily hard to do. What's hard to do is to, in my opinion, make every room feel thoughtful and soulful and look like it was really done with tremendous thoughtfulness and mindfulness. And every image that I saw took me on the journey. And from my reading about your philosophy as a company for you and your partner, it's not necessarily about construction, it's about journey. And that is, it's quite a departure from the traditional thinking of GC developer, that building side of the world. And I wanted to hear a little bit about your story and how that came to be. Was it from the beginning part of your foundation and philosophy? Has it evolved over time? But I can see it and feel it, even though I'm not standing in one of those homes. And I wanted you to talk to that.
First of all, thank you for those compliments. That's very nice, and appreciate that. It started our foundation. Mauricio and I met actually in high school. So my father he's still alive and very, very well. He was a well-known architect, high-end residential architect. So I really grew up around the best of the best in that space. And that really defined a lot of my, my experiences, my foundation, and kind of evolved into, sparked my interest initially, and then allowed me to understand things that in that space. So, it's really, when you say that those rooms are mindful and that you see the purpose in those rooms, it's really interesting because that's a lot of time, planning, and effort, right? And that's what a lot of people underestimate, is that it doesn't just happen that way. To your point, there's a lot of just, horrible designs. There's a lot of ostentatious designs that become, really irrelevant very quickly. And, it's always we always strive to be timeless and relevant. And the same time, being on the leading edge, and it's a fine line between the leading edge and the bleeding edge, right? So, you want to go right to that point of eye-popping and new and creative, but yet the reality is that you want to stop at the point where it becomes bleeding edge. And that's something that's very, it's kind of just comes with knowledge and experience.
It's interesting you talk about rooms and the way things come together. And I know that, again, from my research, that correct me if I'm wrong, your education was actually in urban planning.
Yes,
Is that
that's correct.
accurate? And then taking something from an urban planning perspective, which is about neighborhoods and towns and cities, and now focusing on homes or buildings, it has a very interesting dynamic to it. But many people don't know, before I founded Urban Bonfire, prior to that, I was part of a North American consulting group called Live, Work, Learn, Play that works specifically on mixed use, new urbanist downtown cores, college towns, things like that. And I remember, you may know the name Ray Gindros, who is up here in Montreal for a design charrette. We had 60 urban planners, clients, designers, architects from around the world. And he pointed out in Old Montreal, and I know that you've been here, he pointed out something that even though I've lived here my entire life, I never actually saw, which was in classic French or European architecture, streets were never linear. There was always some form of a curve to it, so you never actually saw where the end was, and it continued to draw the person to want to continue exploring and growing. And it gave me that thought, as you just mentioned, room to room, without ever actually being in a place where you start and finish. And it feels like watching your two videos that I watched, and it feels like, whether subliminally or by design, you have morphed some of that into your philosophy on building and on planning.
That's really interesting. That's I've never really thought about that perspective, but yeah, I think that could certainly apply. It's interesting that how these spaces relate to each other, right? And it's interesting how they flow together, and all of those things are relevant to the success of a project. And it's also interesting to see how these, what are now traditional spaces, things that will always exist, such as kitchens and bedrooms and so forth and so on, how these certain spaces are becoming repurposed, so to speak, and morphing into things that are that people are looking for. So I know this is a bit off sequitur to what you're talking about here, but we're just this kind of bonfire, talk about.
Totally.
I was giving a tour of a project yesterday that we have just recently finished in the Hollywood Hills. And one of the key components is the closets, and the closets are becoming destinations, and the closets are becoming something other than, they're becoming something other than just storing, goods and storing clothes. The primary bedroom closets are becoming experiential, right? And they've got now sofas in them, and they become more boutique-esque, and they become more warm and comfortable, and they've got a mini bar, and they've got these other portions. And so it's interesting to see how to your point, and I'm trying to tie it back to your point, which is that one space leads to another, and you walk into the primary bedroom, then walk into the primary bathroom, and then flow into the primary closet, and that becomes they relate in that way, if that makes any sense.
It makes complete sense, and it leads into two things that I really wanted to talk to you about. One is the changing consumer or client psychology about what a home is and is not.
Yeah, it's interesting. The last 18 months have been extremely challenging for all of us, and I think that
I've just sorry to interrupt you. I've just lost your video feed for some reason.
Oh, just lost my video feed for some reason.
Yeah.
Can you have Josh? I don't know. Can you still hear me?
I hear you great. When we can continue, it's perfectly okay. But
yeah, we've lost it. So if you could, bring it. So I'm sorry. Get back to that other question. You were saying.
Yeah, really just understanding, as you've been doing this for a number of years, and also the fact that you're being around, as you mentioned earlier, your father also in architecture. I think the definition or lack thereof of what a home or what certain rooms are not defined by is a very moving scale. And would love to hear, you mentioned closets as one, the traditional closet is, it's where I hang my clothes and I put my shoes. Now it's, as you just mentioned, completely different. Can you pinpoint or talk about just arbitrarily some of the other areas you've seen dynamic shifts in demand, request, things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's an interesting topic that we mash around here, and it's interesting how quickly those things typically trends go very slowly, and they roll against, you know, against one idea to the next. The last 18 months has really transformed and sped up kind of these monumental changes because of because of COVID, because of the isolation that people have experienced, and because of the amount of time that people are spending in certain areas working from home has been a huge transformation for people. So
Sure.
specifically, home offices, home entertainment, and more specifically, people are looking for ways to stay at home longer. And what we've seen is, the home entertainment. It's interesting because, we can now stream movies. In the U.S., a lot of movie theaters chains are shutting down,
Sure.
and so the studios are now streaming almost immediately. As soon as a movie is done with production, you're able to purchase it. So
Hmm.
the experience of converting what might be a conventional living room, they're converting that into an entertainment room. I think people are looking for less formal. I think people are looking for more, um, communal gatherings with the family. Um, Kitchens are you're seeing a lot of working kitchens, and you're seeing a lot of pretty kitchens, and
Hmm.
those pretty kitchens are typically more adjacent to, there's a place for cooking and there's a place for enjoying, right? So if that makes any sense.
Funny you mentioned about the shift in home entertainment and film, and I noted, I believe it's in your Olive project. I remembered because I looked at it again this morning. There was a candy and snack sort of bar in
Yeah.
one of the elements, and I actually said my 4-year-old, who just loves candy and snacks, would have jumped at that. But to that point, is that now saying the home is replacing, or these rooms are now replacing the movie theater experience, where I would go and get my popcorn and my candy, and now I'm able to create a similar experience at a different level of scale?
I think that's accurate. Yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of things being brought into the home that were, you would have to go to a movie theater, for example. You would
Sure.
have to, that's being brought at home. Another thing is, outdoor spaces. You're talking about outdoor kitchens. You're talking about, pools are becoming, with adjacent spaces, so that people are able to enjoy those things, enjoy the outdoor spaces.
Mhm.
Another interesting concept is we're seeing a lot of storage capacity demands for larger cold storage, larger, pantry storage. People assuming that they're going to be staying for longer, and people are going to be, entertaining more in smaller groups in their home.
Yes, and would you say, or I'm not going to put, my hypothesis, or what I believe, is that if you look at the last 10 years, the the relationship that people have with cooking and home entertaining, and I'm talking about even pre-COVID, has completely changed. Access to ingredients, access to recipes and techniques, where, and I often proclaim that it's almost cooler to have people over and cook than it is to go out. It's more fun, and people now have access to every aspect of what is needed to create that wow factor. And cooking is fun. Chefs are rock stars. They weren't 20 years ago. When we were
Sure.
kids, a celebrity chef was basically Julia Child and then Wolfgang Puck sort of. And now today, it is a genre that is something that is completely mainstream. And I think that has been one of the compelling factors that has changed people's relationships to the definition of what a kitchen actually is in both indoor and outdoor context.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And it's, to your point, the the way that people are cooking, and this is not, let's keep in mind that this is not just for, mega mansions. This is not
Mhm.
for extreme, this is for all spaces, really. I mean, we're looking at trends in small spaces. We have some involvement in some small modular spaces.
Mhm.
And you can be really, really effective. I mean, modern technology is allowed for, what you can spend, $1,500 on a stove and an oven and stove is actually quite high quality, as
Mhm. For sure.
being in your space.
It's very true, and it's getting, and the fact that we had this flood has now had me looking at my ground floor, and was telling my wife Sarah, who's a yoga teacher, who's now also, as you said earlier, working from home with her studio closed, um, looking at our ground floor space and saying, shit, I mean, look at our dining room. It occupies 40-ish% of our total
Right.
ground floor square footage, and we use it 3 times a year. This makes it is completely disproportionate. If we're going to redo this, why don't we merge? Why don't we eliminate the historic or the traditional predefined notion of a dining room and merge
Absolutely.
it into one? And that seems to be happening more and more.
100%. I mean, the living room is a perfect example, is almost an antiquated space. The living room is going away as we knew it, right? I mean, the living room was a place that people would set up their, the holiday events, et cetera, and that's when you only use it. Dining room is also very similar to that. Dining rooms they used to be a separate isolated space that
Right.
would actually aggregate and fragment a floor plan. And to your point at your house, now they're becoming integrated into the family space. You've got, combination of rooms. You've got more zones as opposed to specific rooms. And that's becoming, you've got ups, if you have a 2-story and you've got, the primary bedroom and the secondary bedrooms or the guest bedrooms, you're seeing, upstairs family rooms. You're seeing upstairs, places that people aggregate, where we didn't have that. It used to be just pure function. So it's interesting.
And in the same way that we are seeing that that blurring of definition on rooms, it leads me to something that I wanted to talk to you about, which is also a blurring or redefining or diminishing definition on professionals. And I remember many years ago, I renovated a home that I purchased, and I remembered the frustration of, feeling like in our sandbox, there was the architect and there was the interior designer and there was the contractor. And it was like, there was ego, there was this, and everyone has a voice and everyone wants to prove and almost to the detriment in some ways of the consumer, which I remember feeling like I wish there was just common and aligned vision here. And obviously you and Mauricio, your partner, have tremendous aesthetic and experience in design and architecture, but you are in the role of the builder, GC, developer. How do you play in the sandbox and align with architect or interior designer that you may align with philosophically, you may not? How does that work in today's day and age with a consumer who is far more sophisticated and has a much deeper vocabulary as a result of Houzz and Pinterest and all this access that they have? How has the role changed for you in the last however many years?
That's a lot to unpack in that question.
Sorry.
It's a great question. I'd love to talk about it. Ultimately it comes down to intuitively and with research and factually, really doing your due diligence on the team, right? And we've been involved in many projects that it's just as magical. I mean, everyone plays well in the sandbox. The ideas are collaborative and the egos are set down, and that creates just a spectacular project, right? And we've also been involved in where you have, you've got all of those, each one of those components. You even have structural engineer, you've got, to call it the engineering professionals, you've got the architect, the designer, you have the builder, right? And then you've got the owner. The dynamic really needs to be fluid between all of those people, and that often comes from them working together in the past. That comes from personal relationships. We always say, when I'm advising we're doing, we do a lot of pre-construction services, and we'll be involved with a team that comes in with an owner's team, and we'll help select and put all those people in place. And the number one thing we say is, look, we want somebody without ego, right? We're not curing childhood cancer here, right? We're creating something spectacular. We're adding to the fabric of this world, of the aesthetic world, the architectural world, the physical world. But we're not doing some. Let's have a team that stands down their egos, right? Realizes what the true intent is to create something that makes our client, if it's for a client, happy, and somebody who is willing to come to the table with an open mind, with an open heart, an open skill set, and just mash this thing together what we need. But all it takes is one all it takes is one bad cog in that wheel to absolutely jam the whole process up. And to your point, look, ultimately, as the consumer, as the client, we're all working for you, right? And ultimately our job is to create a smooth and brilliant process for you. And it's not for our own personal ego's sake. And it always amazes me when you run into a professional who is not able to stand down on the ego, and it feels like they're building for themselves, right? And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, this is not your house. We're not doing this for you. This is for the client, right?
Well, it often are. I can see it in some ways as an orchestra. You can have incredible people in string and percussion and all these different types of things, but without a conductor who in their mind can see or envision what that piece of music is supposed to sound like for the audience, they're very isolated areas. And I wanted to talk to you because it brings up something else. Again, from what I in my research, you and your partner having this, if I understand, yin yang like relationship between the form function part of space and the design, the luxurious aspect of said space. And how do those two come together? And when are they at times in opposition, which stirs creative debate or rich discussion?
Well, it's interesting in my particular business relationship with my partner, who we've been partners for longer than I want to admit, but north of 20 years. We definitely have you definitely, everyone has their strong suits, right? And that is what allows us to have such. I mean, we've never been in a physical argument in 25 years, ever, once. So I think that's important, and that's very rare. Mo is very he's an architect by trade, and he was in the architectural. He has an architectural degree.
Mm-hmm.
I am more on the construction side. I'm more of a nuts and bolts, more of a technical person. So I think that yin and yang, to your point, works very well. It poses for great discussions, great collaborations. I mean, look, truth be told, our team here at Dugally Oberfeld is amazing. I mean, we have so many amazing, talented, superintendents, project managers, project engineers, and those, we tend to manage by consensus, right? Not tyranny, meaning that we sit at a table and there's so many brilliant people. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? And then we mash it together and make the decision. I really think that that's ultimately the best way for, especially in this process, to have something that's magnificent. And we feel blessed to have so many. That's when I get excited, right? When you're sitting in a room with a bunch of very talented people and everyone has their specialty, everyone has a passion about something in particular, and letting that come out and letting that additive, create something that the end result and that decision is really with the best decision.
I I agree with you so much on that. It almost it almost feels some way like a parent and watching a child experience or have a success or win something. It feels exponentially better than anything that I could experience myself. I Friday night, I was home late, got an email from a client of one of our dealer partners in Northern California who wrote to me directly to tell me what an incredible experience she had had with one of our account managers who's fairly young, fairly new to the company. He's been with us about 6 months, and took the time to write a 5-paragraph email talking about she's been in sales, she's worked with companies, she's really tough on people, and how the experience was remarkable, and he was patient and nurturing and helpful. And it was one of the great moments of literally of my career to get that, because it just feels incredible. It feels like the
It's
investment
fantastic.
it changes everything.
Yeah.
It's
And really I know that feeling, and I agree with you, and the gratitude for that car to the point of the collaborative process. That's when the spark goes off, right? And you're like, wow, you love to see somebody who is growing, and somebody who's adding, and somebody who's able to make the process so much more spectacular. And
great.
it is. I mean, that's what I always say to my kids. Like, I feel a lot better when you guys win a tournament than anytime I ever won a tournament. I mean, I love it when I see somebody go out and run and succeed.
I want to shift gears and talk about the outdoor space philosophically and in your projects with a little bit more detail. And I acknowledge that, being in greater LA or Southern California affords a level of outdoor use that is not common in most other geographic areas in North America or otherwise. But I still believe that there has been a shift in people's relationship to the outdoors, how much they're willing to invest in it, design with it, use it. And I think that has to do with a lot of features and factors. One are, improvements in technology and building material for outdoor products. I mean, 10 years ago, there wasn't a flat screen that would emerge from, the side of a wall. But
Yeah.
I want to speak with, having done this for as long as you have, can you see or track or note differences in your client's psychology around the outdoor space and outdoor rooms now versus where it might have been at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, that's a great question, great concept. Definitely we've seen a change. Definitely I remember, 20 years ago, it was essentially a gunite pool, which was a square that had some patio space around it, and you had some chairs around it, right? And maybe we had a fountain that was associated with it.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, Technology has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, just something as simple as outdoor heaters. I mean, having the ability for radiant heaters, and in the shoulder seasons here, I mean, it doesn't ever get cold, but it certainly allows people to live outdoors and eat outdoors and sit outside when it's in the winter time. So things like heaters, things like the size of heaters, things like um, all of your products that your amazing products that you've got, as far as the outdoor kitchens and the outdoor barbecues. And it used to have a barbecue, which is a conventional barbecue, and it was now you've got essentially it's a complete outdoor kitchen, right? um, Things specifically that are different. The design of pools is very interesting to me. There's a lot of sections within pools. It used to be that you had a diving board at the one's end, and it was deep, and then it was shallow. Now you've got negative edge, and those a lot of these pools will relate to the landscape, or the sight line or the view, it's with the negative edge. And oftentimes we're seeing a blending between natural, non-chlorinated. So we've got projects where you've got living gardens or trees within, and you've got Baja shells, which is a shelf for laying out in a very small amount of water for children to play in. all of these types of designs are being integrated in the outdoors, and it's all with the purpose of drawing and enjoying the outdoor space. And we're seeing, we build in other markets in less temperate climates. There's ways that those, with retractable doors, right? So you're creating a big trend of spaces that are in the summertime can be open, the wintertime they can be retracted, and you've got outdoor heaters. They're not conditioned conventional space with forced air, but they've got outdoor heaters that you can have in there. So yes, I think if that answers your question, there's quite a bit of movement towards enjoying and spending more time outdoors.
It really it does, and those are really important points, because I think for a very long time, even if it wasn't spoken, the outdoor space was, and I will acknowledge, not necessarily in Los Angeles, or not necessarily in the scale of projects that I've looked at and the types of things that you work on, but in the average person's home, who, even if they were building from scratch and applying tremendous investment and design and down to the choice of materials, for a really long time, the outdoors was the afterthought. It was the phase two. There was no discussion on connectivity between indoor and outdoor. And that is really changing, where
Absolutely.
it's not space, it's now a room, or it's a collection of rooms, and it's being treated as such.
I agree.
And I think it's I think it's a really important thing. And I also, I noted from looking at your projects and also reading about your design philosophies, how important views, light are to your philosophical definition of a home. And that's, it's an experience, it's a journey, it's not just a building. And that connects the indoor and outdoor. And I'd love to hear that. Just looking at the picture behind you, I mean, it's hard to actually tell what's indoor and what's outdoor. It seems like it is seamlessly integrated.
Well, that's an interesting point. Technology has really allowed that this topic to flourish and to become the indoor outdoor become more seamless. Just for example, windows and doors, like glazing components. We weren't able to get a structural piece of glass. We're now able to get a structural piece of glass that's 18 feet by 4 by 18, right? That comes in a standard that's kilned here in the U.S. or kilned in Canada or it, whatever, wherever it is, and shipped. So the structural openings, the engineering of structural steel, and the components have become thinner, which allows the glazing and the openings to become wider. The glass, the engineering of glass, really it's structural glass. So all you're doing is guide rail. So you've got very minimal invasion into the sight line. So it's essentially indoor outdoor spaces. The tracking systems alone, the automation of doors and windows. And we just finished a project in the Hollywood Hills where you have just spectacular, I mean, unbelievable, views. And it's essentially like being in a fishbowl, right? And you've got it's allowed to take the wind load, it's allowed to take the shear load, it's allowed to take all of those things that we have in California, the earthquakes, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it really has changed, and that's why I think we're seeing a massive shift in Los Angeles and in other surrounding areas that we work in. Orange County, San Diego, all of those areas in Southern California are really shifting towards contemporary or traditional, right? And that was always fascinating to us as to why California in particular, aside from very small, very, we got, 50s postmodern, you've got, et cetera, et cetera. And that was obviously, a small piece of the market, but now contemporary is becoming in the mainstream, right? And we're seeing fewer and fewer traditional homes, and even the traditional homes are traditional, right? Or excuse me, transitional. So they might look and feel traditional by massing to the exterior elevation, but you're seeing a lot of contemporary and transitional elements, larger windows, sleeker lines, more minimalistic on the interiors.
And with all of these shifts, as you just mentioned, into more contemporary, and it makes sense, right? Because, as you are, or as companies and firms are uh, expanding the use of materials and technology, that typically is going to lend to more contemporary aesthetic versus older and more traditional. But from someone who needs to, at the same time, have an aesthetic or a design cohesion on the project. And for someone who's been at this for, as you mentioned, 20 plus years, and has worked on, large numbers of projects, where do you go, or how do you continue to seek inspiration or seek creativity? Is it proactive? Is it reactive and subliminal in just moments and places? How do you continue to stay engaged and passionate and excited about what you're doing?
That's a great question. I love travel. Our family has, since a young age traveled quite a bit, and we obviously we haven't been the last year and a half, but
Mhm.
we typically try to get to other countries. We love Europe. We love, the contemporary forms are amazing in Europe, right? You actually think about Europe as old world cities, but if you really dig deep through the layers, there's so many. They're transforming those traditional, 1,000-year-old building to all contemporary on the inside, right? Italy is a perfect example of that. I'm always inspired. I find that research is so much easier today in today's world with technology, right? You can build a lookbook you can go on a wide variety of social media platforms, build a lookbook and get so much done in 2 hours. Whereas 10 years ago, you'd hand, we'd say to clients, hey, look, go through your magazines,
Right?
right?
Cut them
Cut
out
out
and
these cut the
sure,
pictures out, yeah,
of course,
or go
sure.
through these books. We had a library here, of books, and we'd say, hey, just come and check them out, and give us inspiration, so forth. So I think that's also part of what's creating such quick and unbelievable advances, and quite frankly, better products with architects and designers today, is that all of these brilliant ideas are shared, right, so easily. I mean, in a matter of you're across the world, and you can come in and really get a true dive and feel into our product taste and what's going on. And that really goes for anything, right? And every brilliant idea is nothing more than an extrapolation or a modification of a past, a prior idea, right? I mean, there is no such thing as an original idea, right? I mean, it's done in some form other than in some forms in the past. It's really might be a reinvention of it. It might be a recalibration of it, but it ultimately is taken from, a prior idea, right? And prior concept,
Or a
prior
prior
design.
feeling or emotional connection to something and wanting to personify that in some way.
Correct. And so I think it's, I love to travel. I'm inspired by quality work, and at every opportunity that I get, every invitation, I go see, tour, touch, feel any projects that I like. It always amazes me when people, competitors, neighbors don't want to share what their creations and their work is. Every once in a while I get, I will call somebody that I respected as a competitor and say, Joe Blow, saw your project, watch it go up. I'm enamored by it. It looks fantastic. I'd love to come see it. The answer is no. Why would I? No, we don't want you, taking these. And it just fascinates me, right? And we're the exact opposite. Please come. Let's share. Let's talk about it. Let's work through this. I would love to share anything. I'm happy to share any of the resources with you.
I think that is a philosophically, that just is someone or a firm that emotes a level of confidence, that, yes, you're absolutely right. And I feel very, very similarly. Um, I think it's really important. I really do. I think that, as you said, what we're really doing in the design and technology world is we're layering, something we can make better, smarter, faster, more personal. And that's really what we're ultimately doing.
Yeah. Is my feed good now?
No, you
I
went
went,
dark again.
I went dark again. Sorry.
It's all right.
Oh, our internet keeps having some issues. Ah,
No
there we
worries.
go.
There, now you're back. That's cool.
I was better looking in the other. I was better looking in the other.
Right. I I've really, really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm enamored by your work. It really is, looking at the type of spaces and the thoughtfulness of the rooms, and you know, even if I could extract 3 or 4 of them and amalgamate them into my 1,800 square feet, it's philosophically and aesthetic wise, it almost is like there's been a subliminal extraction of what I would envision as the journey of the 4 walls that I consider my home. I'm incredibly respectful and enamored. I think it's gorgeous.
Well, thank you. And coming from somebody like yourself, that means a lot, and I really
Wow.
appreciate that. So when you get over here to Los Angeles, please reach out. Love
I
to
will. I
share
would
that with you.
absolutely love to get a tour of any of your projects, and and I'm sure I'll be in LA before you're in Montreal. But if travel gets you to Montreal, whether it's on business or with your family, it would be my absolute honor to give you a bit of a tour of old Montreal and some of our incredible architecture and restaurants. It would be my great pleasure to do that.
Thank you very much. I might take you up on that.
I enjoyed the time. Thanks for investing the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Be well.
Talk to you
Take care.
soon.
You got it.